Hi, I'm Joe, and I'm a student of Bhante Chandana. Bhante is a wandering monk, and at the moment he doesn't have a permanent home or a monastery. So he depends on the donation and generosity from his students and supporters. So if you find any of his videos helpful or beneficial to you and the people you know, please consider making a donation to him at the link below. Thank you so much and have a good day.
So the question is there such a thing as conversion, converting someone, um, or people in Buddhism, in the Dhamma? The short and sweet answer is no. And it's such a relief. It's such a relief not to have to convert anyone. I've always wondered about that, even as a young kid and growing up as a Christian. Years ago, I would see how people are geared towards trying to push their agenda, in a sense, their own beliefs on others. You have it within Christianity, of course, being apostolic or Orthodox, Armenian Orthodox. That was the upbringing. But at the same time, interestingly enough, I used to attend um, Protestant school, which was very heavy on, being a born again Christian and all that. And then, so I would see the differences, and also within Catholicism. And then growing up in the Middle East, so you see the actual religion of one group versus the other. And even though we relatively were living in community-wise amicable ways, but I saw how in time it was becoming, and I was growing up, being a teenager and then a young adult, I would see how there was this drive to convince someone else to change their point of view, to in fact change their belief in this higher power, spiritual beliefs. So then it becomes a matter of, who's going to beat the other person. When this reminds me, actually, when I was a very young boy, every time we would have these glass bottles of Pepsi, or whenever we would, really behave well, or allowances would have enough, we would have enough pennies in our pockets, we would go and buy a bottle of Pepsi. We didn't have Coke then in that part of the world. So you would get the cap. So the person who's selling at the store, they would open up the bottle. So the cap, we wanted him to keep, give it to us. We really loved, especially in the hot, humid summers, you really would enjoy the Pepsi cold, icy cold. But we would collect those caps of the bottles, and it would be jagged, I think you and listeners know what I'm talking about. So, and there was this game. So we would start from afar in a line, two people going as if head to head, right? Or cap to cap. And you only could move the cap a little bit, like a centimeter, until you would get close. And then you had to use the edge of your thumb and flick it once. and to get it to land on top of the other's cap. And whoever could land it on the other person's cap, you would win. It's very much like that, this whole conversion business. That's the image that I'm getting, which is very gratifying for the ego. So what I'm trying to say is that with all these people who would knock on people's doors on Sundays or Saturdays, and this is not just, about, let's say, Jehovah's Witnesses or Latter-day Saints or other groups, but you also see this in, I've met some, seen some, even in recent Buddhist circles. This has nothing to do with Buddhism, though. It's very much influenced by these other religious leanings or traditions, where you have these individuals who've come to some aspect of Buddhist, or at least on the surface sounding or looking like it's somewhat Buddhist, but the momentum is the same. So the outfit is a little bit different, but the body carrying that outfit is the same. I've seen this when I was in Europe, where people were trying to convince me to, let's say, become or practice like them, even in the States. They were calling me into their house. Oh, we're going to gather here. You should come. We're going to... And I'm like, this sounds oddly, eerily familiar from the times where people would say, oh, we're going to watch this movie about, let's say, Jesus, and we're going to read this Bible, so you should come. You should come. You should come. And you need to read this pamphlet. You need to read... Yeah, but I'm fine where I am. So decades later, I saw myself, in this case, in Los Angeles. And there was this group that I had seen somewhere, and they said, oh, we are Buddhists. And I said, wow, you are Buddhist. Oh, how? How so? And they said, oh, we are Soka Gakkai, or, SGI. I said, okay. What is that? And I knew a little bit, because I had, at the time, been studying. This was like in the 90s and 2000s. So I had been learning a lot about traditions, but this was a relatively newer tradition. It is a newer tradition. So there's the chanting, this and that, and then there was a lot of that atmosphere of conversion, converting. So having said, this is the reason why I'm saying and bringing this up, because some listeners might say, but wait a minute, we have encountered some Buddhists who are very much adamantly engaged in bringing people over, bringing people in. Mass advertising, not just in, Soka Gakkai is highly influenced by a Japanese Buddhist, even though it's, some Japanese would disagree. They don't even consider them as Buddhists. That's up to them. I'm not judging anyone here. But you also find similar things in Vajrayana. Certain aspects of, I've come across, again, this was happening in Los Angeles, but then when I went to Europe, I saw this a lot, where they were even, like, pamphlets were being given on the streets, or sometimes you're not going to see them in robes, but they would hand these stacks of pamphlets to lay people or supporters and distribute them. Well, one time it landed in my hand, and I looked at it, and there was an actual charging of money of, if you want to sit to meditate, you have to pay. And that raised an eyebrow for me, because what kind of a, especially because they claim to be a Buddhist monastic-based, the Kadampa tradition, that's what I'm referring to here. And I was like, wait a minute, there's something wrong here. There shouldn't be any charging of people to come and sit, let alone to listen to a Dhamma talk. So it almost sounded like when you are going into different countries, different cultures, yes, it's understandable because you have to survive. So many people do take on those qualities. But I'm just trying to say we need to be reminded that the Dhamma is not based on any such protocols or tactics, strategies of promulgating oneself or propaganda strategies. Okay? And because it pollutes the whole spirit, the whole drive, the whole what the Dhamma is all about. I was recently in San Francisco and I met a couple. I think they were a couple, but they were going to go on a journey to another country, a Christian Catholic country that has been around for, well, even before Rome, okay, in Western Europe. And they were going to go and take their, beliefs and their Latter-day Saints. So it's like, I think, so they're going to go and they're going to promote their religion. Okay. And they were asking what I'm doing, what would I like, what is the nature of the work I do? Do I go and how do I go? How do I go in people's homes and this and that? How do I convert? And I said, I'm sorry, there's no such thing in our tradition. In fact, I said, if you want to know, long before Jesus sent his apostles anywhere, or even before he was around, Lord Buddha sent his bhikkhus, I'm a bhikkhu, as missionaries. We are the original missionaries, I told them. They were like stunned looking at me. They didn't know much about Buddhism, by the way. So I had to share some thoughts on, how we view missionary work. I said, we just show up. That's it. We just show up. Like about 6 months ago or so, I was somewhere in Mexico, a place that has never seen a Buddhist monk, from what I gathered. And we were there, my student and I, and everybody's eyes were on it. So it was a small village, coastal village. And we're sitting there. It was a hot day, so I said, okay, why don't we get a couple of popsicles from over there, so to cool off. So we sat there in public, right there, with where the benches are, in plain sight, and everybody's eyes were on us. It's a small town. Suddenly, people started approaching because we're not somber looking, we're smiling, we're approachable. But we saw this man who came in with his bike, and he got off his bike and he started asking questions, and his English was pretty good. And he started asking us questions. He asked us about, back then it was relatively new, what the Dalai Lama, the debacle he had done on camera with this, despicable scene that everybody was talking about. Apparently in this village people knew. And he wanted answers from me about that. And I said, I'm sorry, but we do not condone such behavior at all. That was completely un-Buddhist. No monk is supposed to do anything like that, even think about it, let alone invite someone, a young child. Completely non-virtuous behavior. Unacceptable. So when he heard that, he suddenly, relaxed a little bit more. Because first he asked us, what are we? And I said, we're Buddhist monks. I'm a bhikkhu. She happens to be a nun, my student. And so he began asking questions about life. And then he introduced us to other people in the community, etc. So what I'm trying to say is, you will never find a Buddhist monk knocking, a bhikkhu knocking on people's doors to tell them, hey, come to my faith, come to and practice what I am practicing. No self-respecting bhikkhu or Buddhist monastic belonging to this noble tradition is ever allowed to do that. We are invited. We can just be in the vicinity, and people approach or not. It's up to them. So it's an ego trip, because the reason why I was laughing in the beginning by saying what a relief that we don't have that, because it takes a lot of work. You have to leave your cushion, you have to leave your practice and go and tell another person in another country, another remote village, that is, by the way, rich with its own traditions, their own culture, no mores, their own traditions. What grants me the audacity, the conceit even, to presume that you over there, you living over there in that in the Serengeti, somewhere in a village, or nowadays, because they ran out of places in the so-called third world, so now they're going back to Christian countries, and I saw this in Armenia, where you had individuals on the bikes, with a suit and or shirt and tie, and walking into, and they go and learn the language of the natives, and they present themselves, and it's to my understanding, it has nothing to do with spirituality. It has a lot to do with, it's very sneaky, this whole business of converting someone, because you are presuming you know better than they do. You are always playing with that bottle cap, as it were. I'm going to beat you. There are entire religions out there today, very alive, that is their goal, to convert the whole planet into their religion. But they won't tell you openly. I've seen that. I've lived in areas in the world where that is the whole protocol. That's how they are geared towards. That is how they feel like they are doing something wholesome in their religion, because there's nothing else going on. The person is not working on themselves. Their understanding of religion has everything to do with making the other person look and sound and behave in a similar way that I do. Well, do you see this some other places? In other human endeavors? Yeah, you see this you've seen this in every kind of political party, you've seen this in every kind of cult, you've seen this in any kind of, movement, where people don't feel comfortable unless you look and behave like they do, so they feel good about themselves. A couple of years ago, people were disowning family members because the family member was saying, I'm sorry, I don't agree with you going and getting yourself injected with this something that is, I don't see the data. I need to see the data, and it's inconclusive. I need to see more proof. I need to see the science. But well, people say, well, no, you're not part of the bigger group. So we want to make you part of the bigger group. Hence conversion. It's ugly. It's ugly. So when I say there is no conversion, I have to put a caveat or a footnote there, because as I mentioned in the beginning, there are some new offshoots of Buddhists calling themselves Buddhists, but when you look at what they follow, what they, that group I was mentioning, when I was a layman, I was invited to their house, and I went there, and one of their regional senior chief organizational representatives of this region in the world, this as in Los Angeles, was there, going to be in their house. And so you had a lot of people from different parts of Los Angeles there. And I saw them drinking wine. I saw them, there was like a buffet thing. But first they said, we have to chant. I said, okay, what are you chanting? Oh, you can chant. They gave me a thing to chant. And I said, I looked at it. It's all in English, but there's very brief translation. But I'm looking for something Buddhist. I can't find it. It's very much names and titles and this and that and this. I said, okay, maybe I'm missing something here. So I said, no, you guys go ahead, because I'm just here because you invited me. I really didn't want to, but they kept on calling me, so I said, fine, I'll go. They're a nice couple, lovely people. But they're there. So after the chanting, I see everybody's reaching for the buffet and the wine. They're drinking wine, and I'm having trouble trying to do the math in my head. Because there's not even a Buddha statue there. There's just something that looks like hiragana or katakana writing, Japanese style, and it's like an altar that they have to spend a fortune to each household to get, basically, and so they do this. I'm not trying to demean them in any way or try to paint them in this some type of a derogatory way. No, I'm just trying to capture or share here my confusion, my perplexity, because I was having a difficulty distinguishing this from anything else that I had seen with the circles I was in previously, before in my late teens, when I was very much drenched in the Christian and born again and all that world. There was hardly any difference. That's what I'm trying to say. And but is there such a thing in the Dhamma proper? Absolutely not. But one has to also admit that some of the strategies that I see people engaging in promoting their material and things like that, where there's a catch somewhere of gaining some financial or renown, fame, something that equates with money, with prestige, with being, the talk of the town, as it were, and having a bigger monastery. That also, I notice, is using some of these conversion tactics, where there is pressure being applied by the members of, let's say, this monastery, Theravada. Now I'm talking about Theravada, which are, the earliest tradition that we still have, some form of the original teachings of Lord Buddha. But not every Theravada is representing that. Most of it is just ethnic, stuff, rites and rituals, and nothing much more. But you do see some pressure being applied on lay people. That is something that it doesn't sit well with me to see, to witness. So this is now just like a call for people to be cognizant of this and pull back from going down that road because it's ugly. So this is, I appreciate your question because this then becomes a nice segue for me to just say, let's be careful that this does not happen with us, because I'm noticing it's infiltrating into the Buddhist circles, even though it has no place in the Dhamma, in how we talk and teach the Dhamma. So there need not be any pressure, intrinsic or extrinsic, of course, being applied on anyone. If a person is in pain and you're providing the antidote for this pain, you do not go ahead and break the person's door, bother them in their Saturday morning sleep or Sunday morning sleep. One time, this was like 3 decades ago, or maybe less. I hear this knocking on my door, and it was a long, for me it was like I was working on my laptop and I was working on my dissertation, I think, at the time. So I had just slept like a few hours earlier. And I rushed downstairs, thought that, maybe one of my neighbors, and they were all elderly couples. So I thought one of them must have had something bad happen. So their partner's there knocking on the door like, hey, come and help. So I didn't even look as to who might be. I just quickly opened the door and I had rushed downstairs. And I opened the door and I see these 3 or 4 people, very well dressed. Hey, how are you? And I'm like, are you kidding me? I don't even have my glasses on. But I'm like, I thought, in my brain, I'm thinking, what was the emergency? Why did you knock my door that loudly? And I said, I'm sorry, but this is a very bad time. And they said, oh, we can come some other time. And I said, you know what, let's get it over with. What is this about? Okay? And they said, we're here to give you, some pamphlets and good news, this and that. I said, okay, are you happy? I said, are you a happy person? They said, yes, of course, because I said, no. Don't give me something made up. What do you do when you're suffering? And we overcome because there's life after death. And I said, what's wrong with this life? For me, the antidote to my suffering has to come in this life. So don't give me empty promises. Don't get me wrong, I do have very strong understanding and belief in life after death. That's not what I'm saying. But I'm saying I'm not going to wait for 60, 80 years to take the medicine to feel better. In case you're wondering, I said, seeing that you came knocking on my door, I happen to be a Buddhist. Oh, okay. And I said, by the way, Buddhism was around long before any of the stuff that you're selling me showed up. Do you want us to talk about that? You're more than welcome to come in and we'll talk about that. And they saw something that they were not prepared for dealing with. And they left. That was only one of the instances of the knocking on the door on a very well-deserved Saturday or Sunday morning rest, which gets demolished for countless people because of these converting type people who can't seem to find happiness in their lives, and they want to go ruin other people's lives to feel good because they can actually flip the cap and take one more and put that in their bag. because they have this belief that they need to go and like catch, as if they're a fisherman, more fish or sheep, gather the flock. I'm sorry, I'm not a sheep. Definitely don't need a shepherd. So you see how this comes from ignorance. Absolutely. And a lack in taking responsibility for finding answers for yourself. Because you should be dedicating your life to finding a cure to your suffering. What these people are doing is putting a bandage or a band-aid over a Niagara-size flooding that's going on, the bleeding that's going on in their heart. They want to just put patches upon patches and convince themselves that they are happy. They're miserable people. Like the ones that I saw, the couple. They're getting ready to go to Europe to convert. These people that have been Christians for almost, at least 1,500 years. Who are you? Like, what audacity, what conceit you must have to want to go and convert these Catholics, whoever, let's say. It could be Aboriginal, Australia. So this has become some type of a propaganda / political move to dominate and to spread the germs of Western colonialism before it took over. That same methodology is carrying over. Imperialism, of how they destroyed and dominated cultures in India, Africa, Asia. They're still doing it. Something deplorable I saw this past last year, when I was in Chiang Mai, Thailand. The place that I was going to stay, it proved itself unlivable, so I had to quickly find another place to. So there was this hotel, so I quickly went there, and I was fortunate enough to get a room. And I go into this room that I will be occupying, a hotel in Chiang Mai, which used to be, and many people still consider to be, like the Buddhist city in the world, because Thailand is always known as the Buddhist country for some reason, because of all the, propaganda and all that, and movies and stories, etc. So anyhow, I look, I'm opening the drawer, and I see what in the drawer? A Bible. In Chiang Mai. In Chiang Mai. I said, okay, well, at least there should be like a Dhammapada or something there next to it. I'm sure there is. Maybe they're trying to be attractive too. But wait a minute, this is not for a Westerner. This is written in Thai. I was like, wait a minute. Actually, it had both English and Thai in it. I'm like, what's going on here? The audacity that people have had to go into a Buddhist country and to see that, to think that they have something better to offer, and go to Chiang Mai and convince somebody, basically pay off some people, and place these boxes of books into and throughout the hotel. And nothing even Buddhist, even remotely, other than the few statues and the king and the queen and whatever, the typical Thai paraphernalia at the beginning. And you have somebody going there and lighting an incense, this and that, and worshipping the image of the king. Not the Buddha, of course. And that's it. And that's the extent of Buddhists that I saw in that area. I was like, wait a minute, what's going on? So talking about conversion equals pollution. Okay? Conversion equals pollution. If it is something really good, you never see a gardenia or a rose going out of its way, pulling itself out from its roots and going over there where the beehive is and saying, hey guys, hey, I'm here. I'm saving you the trouble. You haven't tried my nectar, my pollen. Come over here. Actually, no, I'm coming to you. You don't see that. It's a ridiculous image. But an image that has been a reality. For centuries, Catholics and Protestants and now Latter-day Saints and Mormons and all others, and it's not just them, anybody. You see this in Islam, you see this in other religions. Bags of rice, bags of sugar, that's what they used to convert people with. And it's the same strategy. I remember in the worst of times in Lebanon, we had neighbors who were getting calls from people from the US that were promising them an easier access to the States. Oh, they were going to do their families, the whole entire family's paperwork to get their visas and everything so that they could move to US if they can convert. You had a lot of things like this happening. And it's just ugly in the name of religion or spirituality, in the name of something that's holy. Well, there's nothing holy about converting. Now, after all that, a person must, and does, in my opinion, to my understanding, always has the choice, their own choice, when it is not being manipulated, without any strings attached. The person, always, so long as you're alive, you must have the freedom to choose. Maybe it is not the path that you are ethnically or your family was born into. Maybe your family was never believed in anything religious or anything spiritual. There's that. But the child grows up and they're asking questions. So the person must have the freedom to go ahead and explore and to find out and not be persecuted for that. And if you find yourself converting on your own terms, with the freedom, without having any kind of, hidden agendas, either from you or especially from others, if you have all these things available to you, then it's a wonderful thing. But as a religion that promotes itself through the violent and rape-like action of going and forcing itself on other cultures, that is absolutely 100% non-religious. Nothing to do with anything holy. Nothing to do with anything that is pure, good. This is something that later traditions, later religions made up, people made up. If there's anything good in a religion, people will come. You don't have to force yourself. It's ugly. It's ugly. Going and knocking on people's doors, speaking in a way or dressing in a certain way that they would be, oh, this is what, it's just ugly. You're being sneaky, cunning. So yeah, conversion is out. It's ugly. And you had another question, I think. I forgot to answer, or that had to do with has there been a situation where blood had been spilled for the Dhamma? Buddhism is the only religion. The Dhamma is the only religion where you don't find anywhere in the teachings of Lord Buddha and in the lives of individuals who practice the Dhamma proper, not just monastics, but lay people as well, where there was not even a single blood spilled in the name of the Dhamma, of Buddhism. It's quite unique. It's unprecedented. There's nothing like it. No religion could actually claim that status. None. None. Buddhism can. Now, what you have are individuals or philosophers that have used Japan, or a specific group of individuals during the imperial expansion of Japan into Manchuria and other places, where they, especially Zen tradition. For example, one very well-known scholar from the 20th century, Japanese, D.T. Suzuki, during the War of Japan and its imperial war, he was justifying Japan's expansionist strategies and all its occupations and killing of countless people, murdering, raping, pillaging countries, whether it was in Manchuria, China, other places in the Pacific, as something noble. There were even individuals, including himself, where they were saying that the sword, the soldiers that were using, basically, the Japanese soldiers, the sword is the sword of justice and compassion of Buddhism, of Dharma. So scholars look at D.T. Suzuki as a Buddhist scholar, so they say, oh, so he wrote this, and he never actually apologized for it, D.T. Suzuki, from what I know, unless he has somewhere, but I've never seen it. So they use that as, see, Buddhists, you did spill blood, and a lot of it. Well, they are looking at a picture that is not Buddhist. That had nothing to do with Buddhism. They were simply manipulating. They were forcing, they were squeezing, a square peg into a round hole, as it were. Because Buddhism, which had already gone through so many transformations within Japan itself, even when it landed from China, and actually from Korea also, it was already something that was completely different than what Buddhism was. But even on the land of Japan, it had changed a lot under the pressure of existing and coexisting with the other religious traditions that were morphing to fit the cultural fabric, the changing cultural fabric of Japan. Whether it was Kobodaishis or Kukais, tradition of Shingon and others, Tendai and others, and then also Jodo Shinshu, all these things that happened. So everybody had to fall in line. The emperor or the imperial court was deciding what was to be. So anything that they could use as a propaganda tool, they were using. So, but it had nothing to do with Buddhism. But you're right, because your question was earlier that, has there been, to my understanding, that there's never been, and you were saying, yes, that is true. No blood has been spilled in the name of the Dhamma. If there is, it is not Dhamma. It's somebody manipulating the Dhamma. You see this in some people try to do that in places like Sri Lanka. Some people have been trying to do that in Burma, in other places. Some people, even in Tibet, when the Dalai Lama was just, he was still a young monk at the time, in that post when the Chinese occupation began, they were ordering monks to carry arms and shoot the Chinese. Well, where does the Buddhist part come in? So you have these, the documentaries, you have footage of monks having to give up their rifles under the pressure of obviously the Chinese that surrounded. The Chinese military were around them. They had guns. They were they weren't shooting in the air, they were aiming at other human beings and shooting, pulling the trigger. These are monks. So this had nothing to do with the Dhamma. This was something that is completely convoluted. But again, we don't like to look at these things. But when you look at the teachings, there's never been. The 45 years of life that Lord Buddha had in India, not a single incident, not a single moment do you see where Lord Buddha says, well, under these circumstances you can kill or snap the head of someone or slit the throat of this person who's coming at you to kill you, to protect this territory. There's no such thing. When I was about 15 years old, I had gone to the monastery in Lebanon, a Christian monastery. And one time I had the senior abbot, the monk, we were all in the seminary, we were training, so it was a seminary / monastery. So we were training to become monks. And I still remember that day. It was cold, and the senior abbot stood there in front of the altar, and he said, even though Jesus tells us to love our enemies as if we're loving ourselves, but there are exceptions, he said. And my eyebrows went up. And I'm like, what? He said exceptions. There are exceptions. So if your enemy does this, if your enemy does that, then you have to protect it, and you have to protect your loved ones, and you have to kill them before they kill you. And I was just a 15-year-old kid, and I'm like, and I was afraid of the guy, by the way. Honestly, because he had this very menacing look. And I'm like, what? It didn't, that's not the Christianity I believed in. I still don't believe in such a thing, being justified as, as being, but that's what they sell. So no such thing exists in Buddhism. You will have some rogue characters here and there, but that will never find its justification within the teachings of Lord Buddha. I think that's enough.